I believe it or not, there's like 20 different types of frag plugs, and some of them are actually way better at some jobs than others.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Today we're gonna find out using Euphilia. Are you doing encrusting corals? Are you doing SPS corals? Are you trying to fight off algae? Are you trying to look for a more natural look in the tank? Today is the Frag Plug Buyer's Guide. Believe it or not, you're gonna walk away with this with the right tool for the right job and know, like, you know what, there's more to this world than I thought, and I'll actually have better success because of it. As always, we start off with the bestseller, meaning the number one thing that you guys pick up, voting with your dollars is the thing that you like the most.
Yeah, and no surprise to me here, but it's your standard frag plug from Ocean Wonders. The 25 pack, we go through a whole bunch of those. I'm sure there's a lot of people that go through a whole bunch of these. Probably why they make them so popular.
I hate them. You know what? I don't know. They're super, super efficient, right? But they have this big peg on the back. So if you're like a grown-up coral, they sit in the egg crate really great, and probably why they're the number one tool out there. But you're actually going to find out a bunch of reasons why some of this other stuff on the table actually might be better suited for what you're trying to do. But if you're trying to do SPS frags and lots of them, and this is number one, they also have a aragonite version, and they have a ceramic version. The ceramic version is the one that you want. Cost an extra $1 or so, but what it does is it doesn't leach anything in the rock or into the water, even at scale, because it's like kiln fired. So ceramic little peg, guys, is the number one option out there as picked by you guys. All right, spoiler alert, there are two that Randy and I like the most. We'll just tell you that right up front.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going with the crowd, and you know, from a background of fragging so much, needing a whole bunch of these, I like them because they're cheap, I like them because they're inert, and they're really effective. I mean, they're quick, easy, ready to use.
There's no question. I just don't like how they go into the tank and some other issues. So for me, if I was doing SPS, I'm gonna go very similar with that, but I'm gonna go with these black ones actually. So the black ones don't grow algae on them the same way as the white ones. So if you have problems with pest organisms growing on your frag plugs, black is actually one of the ways to fight that off. And you know what? If you're growing out hundreds of frags, this is the way to go. However, if you're just doing it for yourself and your buddies and bring them to the store, or you're even just trying to like mount them on your own rock at a later date, rubble is my pick.
Yeah.
Right? And so growing the frag on a piece of rubble allows me to just move this. If I got some Marco rock in my tank already, move this right on there, matches the rock. And you know what it also lets me do? Someday, if I want to move it, I can break this piece right off and it'll go somewhere else. I can, move the entire colony in some cases. So for me, rubble, there's also some purple rubbles we'll talk about here, but those are the two things that are the spoiler alert of what we use here. All right, so right tool, right job, starting with some of these categories. SPS corals, we already hit it.
Yeah, peg, fits in the egg crate, holds steady and firmly in the egg crate because you don't want these things blowing around all over the place, getting jolted. That's the way to go for sticks.
Yeah, that's the number one thing. And in fact, I've seen a lot of people try to use frags that, like, even these things, put something around them to hold them in place, because SPS seems to do better when it isn't jostling around and it's real stable. However, for LPS corals, something else. You don't have all that flow blowing around, so you have different options here. And so these discs actually work really great for a lot of encrusting corals to grow on, because there's just not enough surface area on one of these things. It's great for growing zoanthids. It's great for, really all kinds of corals where you just need a bigger surface area and there isn't flow blowing it all around. And then what I don't have to do is I don't have to break this peg off when I want to mount it to the core or to the rock work. I can actually just glue this guy right on there, especially if it's totally covered in coral. Yeah. Often I still like to break it off myself. But so the flat round ones, actually one of the best tools. Real close to that though is the tiles, little square guys.
Oh yeah, so I like to get encrusters, and especially for encrusters and things like that, is score the back end so I can break it off, and now I've got a nice little chunk of encrusting coral that I can share, put somewhere else, do what have you. But it's just a massive surface area.
Yeah, so that little square there, it's actually not that much bigger than this one here, right? But that was the first time I ever heard anybody talk about scoring it,
Yeah.
actually. So like you could break it into 4 little chunks once it's covered the whole thing. I think that's really cool.
I've used it for SPS too, and what I found is that your stick doesn't want to grow up as much because it's spending most of its time spreading its base along the bottom before, and then it gets little nodules. But on the when it runs out of space, left to right, it seems to want to pop up more on the peg.
That's an interesting note because for sale, you'd want as many little nubbins as you could get. But for my tank, I actually want a really nice strong base. One of the cool things about the squares too is that they like share an edge, right? And so if you could put a little 4 of them together or put one around the middle one, like you can get it to spread out. So you're growing zoanthids, mushrooms, whatever, you can get them to just kind of migrate off the small one onto the ones around it. So those square tiles, especially for encrusting corals, you want to snap them off, or corals that are spreading out, really cool options. All right, next, if priority number 1 is a nice clean look inside the tank where I don't see that frag plug and it just looks like an extension of the rock, there's 3 options.
Yeah, it is these, these rubbles. So you got the Carib Sea frag zone, you got the real reef ones that are purple, and then you got the Marco rock, reef saver rock frag mounts over here too. But as much as I like to put corals on little plugs like that, I personally hate to put little plugs like that in my own tank. I can't stand the look of them. I can keep that shape you can see the circle forever, and it's just an eyesore for me, which is why these options are, exist, and what I would do in my own tank if I was putting, frags in, I'd put them on these.
One of my biggest pet peeves is actually this
Seeing
thing,
that?
right? Seeing the encrusting coral, like your Monty mount off of this thing, and it always has this big weird
Unnatural.
circle in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And so in that case, all 3 of these options, basically this what are the frag zone here, is the same thing as this one, except for dyed purple. So if your rock is all covered in coralline and you have Marco rock already, the frag zone stuff here might actually match it, as well as their own life rock. This will match it and look like an extension of the rock. Again, cool piece of this is that I can snap it off. I can super glue it on. I can snap it off. The whole coral will come with it. Or like maybe the coral's even spread off. I could just snap it off, and this is my frag now to give to somebody else or trade. If your water or your rock is still white, this stuff right here. And you might think this is just rubble, and I guess on some level it is, but it is really pieces that are selected good for this purpose. It's not just filled with tiny little bits.
Yeah, and this reef, the real reef stuff is interesting. They actually have molds that they have made. So some of these, you look and you're just like, oh, I could easily fit a coral on there, something that encrusts over the little plug, and actually doesn't look like a perfect weld out, cut, drilled circle. It's got some shape to it. It's got some life to it. So I'd probably end up choosing one of these for my SPS stick rather than one of those plugs, because then I can put it in there, and when it bases over the top, it just looks like part of the natural rock work.
Yeah, so there's 3 options here. If you just wanted to make it look like a natural extension of the rock, I will say my 2 favorites looking at all of these things, for me, is probably one of these 2, but one of them probably spoke to you. We don't have it up here, but Ocean Wonders actually has something similar to these frag mounts as well. So the same guys that do the coral frag plugs also will make like a synthetic little mound rock that you can use as well. But one of the cool finds we did while we were doing this project is I'd never used these before, but I found out that these Aquadomes have a really unique purpose.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about the euphyllia, like the branches and things like that, you get yourself a little head of torch or frog spawn or something like that, and then you think, well, where am I going to put this? Now, I've always taken like a branch or a head of euphyllia and just jammed it in one of the holes in my rockscape. But here I can actually glue the euphyllia on the top of this thing, keeps it up off of the sand, and also a pedestal to allow it to open up all wide. Heavy though.
Yeah, it's heavy. It'll hold it in place. So, big coral that can capture a lot of flow, this thing will hold it in place. It's not a peg.
Tipping over,
And I think that they'll probably be reusable, meaning like if you want to frag up a euphyllia, like it is, grown a whole bunch of heads you don't need in your tank anymore, and you're going to cut them all off and trade them with somebody, you can mount them to this thing, get them real healthy, and then when somebody uses them, you can snap it off, do what you just talked about, and then use it again for fragging in the future. So I don't know, these cool little domes are heavy, and they look great for a branching coral like some euphyllia. So, learn something new every day. Aquadomes. Pro tip, black is a way, way better option. Most of the commercial aquaculture facilities use black.
And primarily algae. I've grown a bunch of frags before, all on those white ceramic ones, and then I've had my bouts of algae, hair algae, all kinds of bryopsis and stuff, clinging to that white ceramic plug or the white plug, and I probably could have avoided a lot of it if I used black instead.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of aquaculture facilities using like some form of black peg just because it like absorbs light rather than reflects it, and it just doesn't grow as much algae on it. And so, they are a little bit more expensive, but in terms of time, it is expensive fighting algae, and getting all the algae growing at the bases actually reduces the results as well. So yeah. Think about the color. There's also a purple option, which is probably middle of the road here. So if you're going to use this peg in there and you want to hide it, purple will work as well. This is a personal preference, but if you're going to use a lot of frags, like you're going to add like 500 frags to a system at once, I would go this route.
Yeah, go with the kiln dried or heat dried. Ceramic ones, less chance of precipitating some nasties into your tank. Safe.
Yeah, you're looking for inert. You're going to have no chemical change to the water by adding these. It's not like cement or anything else like that will, on small scale, not have a lot of effect. But if you had 500 of that thing, it might. So if you're going to use a lot of them, ceramic, the way to go. So you're probably clear on which one of these frag plugs was right for you, but there are also some other tips that matter.
Yeah, one of them is creating some space for you to pop the coral off later on. So you had mentioned maybe putting a tiny little bit of rock underneath it so you kind of get an open space. Or when you're gluing the thing, leave a spot open so that way I can get my chisel or whatever tool I'm using underneath the coral and pop it off.
More or less, just leave a little bit of a crack. And I mean, if you want it welded to this for life, then you gob it in glue. But if at some point you would like to get that coral off, don't use a ton of glue, only as much as required to hold it in place for that specific time and purpose, and leave a little bit of an opportunity to pop it off. That actually leads into the next one.
Yeah, which is a minimal glue just in general. Specifically for me when I'm, fragging sticks, I don't want this big giant mound of glue that I dab the stick in, how most of its tissue at the bottom is covered. All that was live tissue at one point in time. Now it's got to spend energy getting up and over the big mound of glue that you just stuck it in, when half amount or a quarter amount of the glue would have got me there a heck of a lot faster.
To be honest, a lot of corals also don't really like, growing over glue, and so it's easier for it to grow onto the rock or the frag plug. And so, if you just use just enough for it to actually attach, you'll have way better luck. So you can check out all these options here on the BRS website, and ceramic might be the lion's share and most popular with this little peg, but you know what? There's a lot of other options out there, and you can go check out the reviews on the site and see what other people are saying.